The Ward Scott Files is produced by Ward Scott Files, LLC.
Come on, everybody! Come on, everybody!
This is a Ward Scott Files advisory. The Ward Scott Files radio show may contain material not suited for people who are easily offended. Trust us on this. This show contains adult information and opinions. Please protect small children, sensitive pets, fragile houseplants, and liberal relatives. Thank you.
All right, good morning, good morning. Here we are on the Ward Scott Files in the undisclosed location of the man cave here. Got my good buddy Jay here behind the wall. I'm just making a couple adjustments here to get everything ready to go with you. A lot of things to talk about today, as always, and some of the ones are conjecture here. I'm going to let you know right away that it's conjecture, and you know, somewhat it is the culture and the atmosphere of suspicion that we now live in that has fueled some of these things. We'll find out over time whether there was any truth to them or not, but there's been a lot of course attention given to this catastrophic event, of course, with the Notre Dame Cathedral burning. And so I wanted to spend a little time talking about the climate in which this fire has taken place and some of the suspicions or concerns that may or may not be founded in eventual outcomes and discoveries, but nevertheless, these things exist in people's minds because of the nature of the times we're living in and some precedent that's occurred in Paris already. So I happen to be watching or maybe listening on Sirius 2 this when it happened, and this occurred when Bill Donahue who is the head of the Catholic Church here, I think, in this country, was talking about whatever was going on with this cathedral fire in Paris. And we know, to put this in context, that the whole issue of Muslims in Europe has become a contentious issue. Hungary, by the way, has built a wall to try to stem, and successfully so. It's worked. The onslaught of immigrants coming into their country unchecked. There's been discussion about whether or not this is too late to do in Europe. It's obviously affected the whole culture of Europe. And these are ancient issues that have been going on for quite a while, particularly where the Catholics and the Muslims are concerned. There have been battles before between these two belief systems, if you will, if you want to talk about it the way an anthropologist would talk about it. And it's been a troubled interaction. It's not been one that's been done with any sort of resolution or reconciliation or tolerance, if you will, because there's little acceptance of any validity in the other's point of view by each one of the people involved in the dispute. So there's a context in which this is occurring, and out of that comes conjectures. And Bill Donahue was talking to Neil Kavoda yesterday, and was just asking, a good question, and that is, how has the fire started? Was it started by accident? And right now, by the way, the official interpretation is that it was started by accident. And everyone's going to be comfortable, I can assure you, with that interpretation. And if there ever was another interpretation, it's not going to be one that's going to make people comfortable, because of the history and interactions of the problems between Catholicism and the Muslim religions. So Neil Kavoda actually terminated the call when Donahue brought this up. Now, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but a lot of people caught a lot of people's attention, and they, noticed it right away. That Kavoda hung up on Bill Donahue after he speculated about whether or not the Notre Dame fire might be having to do with recent church attacks, which there have been several on churches in Paris. And just the speculation or the raising of the question produced a reaction. So you can see right off the bat that this is a sensitive issue. Now, this sensitive issue is what I kind of want to expand on for the first part of the show here, because there's some cover-up of the intentions of Omar and Tlaib, I think, by the Democrat Party. There's some sugar coating of this issue, and as I've said all along, I've been told face to face by some of the major participants in this whole movement of taking over the country from within by the Muslims themselves to me, that this was the goal. So I would have been as unsuspecting as the next person had that not been offered to me, quite circumstantially and by accident, and by a person who is a very well-educated fellow who can think all these things through and has the quality and ability to put it into action. So thought we'd go back and take a look back just for a moment. I make no associations necessarily with this event in the past with the event that just happened yesterday, but if you go back and you take a look at some things that occurred in the past, there was a probable attack, I think this was 2016, that was uncovered in Paris on a Sunday morning about 7 a.m., and the average citizen did not hear about it for a couple of days later when the French news outlets reported it. And that 2 or 3 day lag is what I'm talking about. There is an attempt to keep this sort of business muffled, because you can see that it can become quite a hysterical type of thing here if you let it get exaggerated and you put the wrong kind of emphasis on it. But nevertheless, there was a situation that the average citizen in France did not hear about for a couple of days when French news outlets then reported it as the confiscation of a car filled with 7 propane tanks on a street near the Notre Dame Cathedral. And the vehicle was a Peugeot 607. It raised suspicions because it had been parked improperly with its lights still on. The license plates had been removed. Probably the car was stolen. Late on a Tuesday evening, before the public learned about this, 2 unnamed suspects, a 34-year-old man and a 29-year-old woman, and the Daily Beast is covering this, from which and other outlets have covered this. And this story, as I say, is an old story, so don't confuse it with yesterday's activity. But there is, what I'm saying here, a memory of this and a precedent for this that Bill Donahue, I'm sure, was fully aware of, and Kubota cut him off because he didn't want to add any, any inflammation to this whole thing, I guess. But still, it's something we need to spend some time taking a look at, so I want to do that with you right now to see how this Muslim issue is being treated around the world, so I'm going to try to give you a panorama of that. So then there were 2 unnamed suspects, a 34-year-old man and a 29-year-old woman. They had been known both to France's domestic intelligence agency, and they had been known for espousing this philosophy and being anti, if you will, Christian or anti-Catholic in this case. And wasn't much else known about them except they belonged to the Islamic State and had associations with ISIS. And they had trained in Syria, and they had been dispatched to the continent to lie in wait until upon execution of a mission. That was one issue. Or they had to determine then, were they lone wolves or what they call stray dogs that merely inspire ISIS to commit mass murder? So are they copycat people who assume the identity of ISIS without actually having been sanctioned and sent there by ISIS? And that's a difficult thing to learn. And I suppose in results it doesn't much matter whether the person was actually sent by ISIS or the person believed that ISIS had, or the person had actually been, believed that he had been sent by ISIS, because the activity results in the same outcome. So this was, of course, in this place that we have now focused on. We're practicing Catholics. And this, of course, the other thing that gave some sort of credence to the suspicion was that this was close to the holy days of the Catholic Church and the Christian religion. So it became an antenna up type deal, and the concept of a Notre Dame plot became, and jihadist and all that became arguably a new stage of anxiety in Paris. So what I'm saying, yes. Yeah.
One of the deals is this Inez Manani woman. She was the one that tried to blow it up with the propane tanks.
Right.
She just got sentenced a few days ago. This is from Vivian Hazel on Citizens for Trump. She just got sentenced a few days ago. I'm looking it up. It's true. That's kind of suspicious right there.
Have you got that public, what you're saying to me? Okay, good. You heard Jay saying that, then we're getting some feedback from people who are watching us on our Citizen for Trump platform, that this lady who just got sentenced a couple of days ago. So you can understand that there is some reason to be cautious here and to be, rather than circumspective and apologetic, and we apologize for even thinking, as Kavoda suggested to Donahue, how dare you bring that up? What could you possibly be doing that for? This is a bad enough situation as it is. Here's somebody texting in with us, is over 800 church fires. So this is an issue of faith that is characterized by the media. If you're not careful, it's either covered up or de-emphasized or censored. So it's really, as you know, what the Muslim claim to be up to is world domination. And they take this from their religious texts and interpret it that way. And saying this, I know that there are the people who are quote unquote moderate Muslims, but that's not who's running this movement. The radical Muslims are running the movement, and by that I mean you've got two examples of it in the United States Congress, and all you have to do is look at their statements where they declare Palestine to be an actual entity, which it never was, and then of course label Israel to be the terrorists of the world, and exonerate themselves completely. So this is all running back to what they attribute their marching orders to the Prophet Muhammad, and Muhammad told them there would be the inevitable clash between the armies of Rome and the armies of Islam. And so there is a long historical context to this. Much of this is going on in some places and has been for quite a while in Syria and Iraq. And Allah's permission is one that is fueling the crusades of the Islamics to continue their battle, which is a long, long time battle with the armies, the Crusaders of Rome, if you will. So this is really, to some of these people, a declaration of total war, and they are dug in, and they're taking all sorts of tacks to make their goal achievable. One of which, as we've been talking about, which was told to me, and I'm sharing it with you, is to infiltrate the United States government, get control of the government, change the laws, change the emphasis, change the discussions, change the conversations, and begin to put in Sharia law, which I want to get into with you here in a moment. So it really involves sowing a lot of mayhem and destruction in what they call the land of disbelievers, and then watching these societies cannibalize themselves. This is all part of the strategy. This is a well-known strategy to those who are following Allah, as I understand it, and as that's been reported here in the article about 2 years ago when this first sort of broke out, or 2 or 3 years ago. And that's, if you take a look, in a way, the Democrat Party is cannibalizing itself. It has got, Tlaib and Rashid arguing with each other and being covered for by, reluctantly, and I have to say, reluctantly by Pelosi and that crowd. So it's not a new tactic. It's sowing mayhem and destruction in the land of disbelievers and then watching the societies cannibalize themselves. So the church burnings are not unprecedented here, and so you can understand why Donahue would at least venture the conversation. Now, of course, why Kavoda cut him off is for fear of inflaming Islamics. So that's that. Don't make them any worse than they could perhaps be. So what is the right tack to take here with this issue is kind of what I want to discuss with you and put into a context with you, because ISIS has targeted all around the world different areas by which to launch their disorder and set people against each other to cannibalize each other, and then they stand back and watch the chaos. So we'll see how this is a long article. It is, as I say, examining this all coming about as a result of this woman being, and Jay just says that woman just got sentenced a couple of days ago, showing up outside this structure, this very sacred structure a few years back, with obviously the intent of blowing it up then. So, yeah, this was just a few days ago when she was sentenced, right, Jay? So I appreciate you listeners texting in on that and letting us see it. I knew of this, and you obviously out there, this is what it's all about, is collectively having these conversations and sharing them with each other. And as I say, I'm not doing this in order to be, start some rumor. I'm not a paranoid type person. I'm just saying this is the context into which we have found ourselves right now having this discussion. So it's got some other things that are going on in the background that are clearly probably involved with well, the whole conversation and atmosphere. For example, today, as I understand it, that the Daily Caller was reported, and I think this is probably pretty doggone shrewd of Trump. Trump is going to get out ahead of this. He has invited to the White House Democrats to face accusations of anti-Semitism. That is, I applaud that tactic. So the Trump White House is going to today, as I understand it, host 70 Jewish community leaders to discuss pertinent issues. And I think they had this scheduled long, of course, before this fire at Notre Dame, to discuss pertinent issues as to whether the Democratic Party faces accusations of anti-Semitism. And here's what's happening with the Democrat Party, and if you want to go along with the battle plan of ISIS and the Muslims, it is to sow this disorder and then let these people cannibalize each other. There is a case that can be made that the Democrat Party is cannibalizing itself, and because it's allowing and making excuses for Tlaib and Omar, and you can even throw AOC in there because she sympathizes with them. So they back off Pelosi and that other crowd, and Schumer is Jewish, so last time I checked, and so there's a real problem going on. So Trump is getting, I really think about this, Trump is getting out ahead and saying, come on over here to the White House. We're all Western theology. Let's sit down and have a talk about this. So the American Jewish leaders received this invitation recently, so it was given before the fire, to meet with key White House officials for this discussion about pertinent issues impacting the Jewish, this is reported by the Jewish Insider. So a White House official has confirmed that this event is taking place today, Tuesday, April the 16th. The White House will host more than 70 Jewish non-profit leaders, business leaders, and rabbis to meet with senior administration officials. And this is an ongoing engagement with community leaders. In this case, it's going to focus on this particular Jewish situation where the Democrats, who've always taken the Jewish vote for granted, just as they've always taken the black vote for granted, really, Trump is pretty clever. I don't even think it's clever. I think he just honestly is concerned that people have a discussion about this, and I'm not even going to put it on a political level. Yes, sir? Okay, Jay's going to put a picture up here in a moment. Yeah.
So there's a Nazi swastika and a Star of David, and it says equals. Do you understand the problem?
Right. I understand.
That's what we're living in today.
So I think Trump is doing the right thing. Now here we've got the Democratic Party has now taken on the image of a group that is anti-Semitic, largely because of their inability to discipline, or reluctant to discipline, or sugarcoat, however you want to put it, Ilhan Omar, when she accused Israel of hypnotizing the world. And since taking office, she's used several anti-Semitic statements and all that sort of business, and with impunity. So House Democrats attempted, you may recall this, to pass a resolution condemning Omar's repeated comments in March, but they ended up watering down the resolution to condemn all. Now, this is really interesting how this chain of events happened. They ended up watering down the resolution to condemn all forms of hate and did not mention Omar by name, and that ends up with them hauling in the likes of, which blew up in their face, Candace Owens to talk about hate, and then trying to entrap her as somebody who was supportive of Hitler, and she blew them out of the water with her reply, and we have shown that to you. How did that committee turn into a committee on hate? Let's go back through this and make sure that you understand it was originally meant to be a resolution condemning Omar. The Democrat Party couldn't bring itself, evidently, to do that, so it created an inquisition on all forms of hate and lumped in, of course, the Republicans as the haters and brought in a Democrat black lady who turned out to be a Trumper, and it blew up when they tried to frame her as somebody who, because she was a Trumper, supported Hitler. These are some dangerous emotions and a rewriting of history that's going on here. And then my point is in today's show is this is the context in which the flame of Notre Dame has shown up on, and out of which have been reactions, and some of which have already been censored, and some of which have been censored in the past, if you will, or watered down is another way of saying it. And Nancy Pelosi has defended Omar and claimed, this was her language, this was Pelosi's language, that the freshman representative doesn't understand, okay? Well, this is preposterous, all right? This is one of the biggest fabrications that I can think of, that Nancy Pelosi defends Omar and claims that the freshman doesn't understand why her comments about Israel were considered offensive. I got to take a sip of coffee on that. Are you serious, Pelosi? So Trump, according to some pundits, feel is capitalizing on the turmoil within the Democratic Party. He's insisting, and I think he's correct, and he knows how this guy Trump is. He really knows how to control the stage, and he's an expert. He's probably unprecedented in his ability to do this, and that is to control the stage and control the headlines. I can't think of a person in my lifetime who has been more thoroughly discussed throughout the world, daily, hourly, minute by minute, than Donald Trump. So Trump has capitalized, apparently, on according to some observers within this Democrat Party, by insisting that, and if you will, rubbing it into Pelosi, that Omar controls Pelosi, okay, and points this out in a private fundraiser where she said that Democrats, hate the Jewish people. The Democrats have become, quote unquote, an anti-Israel party, and they have become anti-Jewish, and that's too bad, Trump told reporters. And so now, by having folks in today, obviously he's following up on that. He's following up on the fact that the Democrats, now let's make sure we know where this started. The Democrats passed the anti-hate resolution, went looking for somebody to entrap Trump as the agent of hate. It backfired on them. The reason they did that is because they couldn't bring themselves to confront and so properly label Omar as the vehicle of hate. So they changed the whole marquee headline, and the rest is history. So meanwhile, Trump has done several things, of which Candace Owens alluded to, moving the embassy. She said she went to there, recognizing the Golan Heights as Israeli territory. And you have to remember that the press had Netanyahu losing the election, maybe even being hauled off to the jug, and they kept repeating those headlines because he's a supporter of Trump, and Trump's a supporter of him, and of course exactly the opposite turned out. He won the election, and so we'll see how this goes today. We'll try to cover what happens. It's according to the article here is the Jewish Telegraphic Agency says that some of the Jewish groups are American Jewish Committee, Zionist Organization of America, Republican Jewish Coalition. So I wanted to put that into the context of all these recent events. The easiest thing to do would be to do what the other news outlets are doing and say, oh, it's just horrible, and it'll be rebuilt, and sort of counting all the money that's coming in. That's not really the issue, okay? That's not really the issue. What this is another instance of a long time attack on the armies of Rome by the Muslims. If not, in this case, deliberately set, certainly others have been. So you can see the context in which the suspicion has occurred, and it's not all that far-fetched. Now, Tlaib, just to put this in context for you, maybe help you understand how unrepenting Tlaib and Omar are. Thursday on MSNBC's AM Joy, last Thursday, Rashida Tlaib said that President Donald Trump's tweet that used 9/11 imagery to criticize Representative Ilhan Omar for her recent comments describing the September 11, 2001 terror attacks as, and this is what Omar said, it was some people did something. Tlaib said that, you reverse the madness in this technique. Tlaib says, well, Trump's tweet incited violence toward Muslims. Now, that's getting pretty bad when the President of the United States cannot support and talk about the most heinous attack by Muslims on this country in our lifetime. I mean, I can't think of anything any more profoundly heinous than flying planes into the towers. They attempted to fly them in the Pentagon. One of them got dumped over there in the field in Pennsylvania. This was an all-out assault. And it led to some permanent changes in our lifestyle in America. There's no question about it. Now that we have this relocation concentration of people brought to these communities by Obama's relocation program of refugees that was done clandestinely, and they've been materialized enough to create their own representatives now in the form of Tlaib and Omar. Now we're getting it where the president is inciting violence toward Muslims, when Muslims have demonstrated the violence toward the United States and France and other places repeatedly, and have as a stated goal to march on the armies of Rome. So Tlaib said, quote, no question is he inciting violence toward, no question, she says no question. You have to watch the rhetoric of these people. She doesn't say in my humble opinion or in, perhaps from this point of view, or she doesn't try to moderate it at all. She just comes out and makes it an aggressive confrontational statement. She says, no question is he inciting violence toward Muslims, not even only Ilhan Omar, but Muslim Americans in this country. I share this to all Muslims who are listening to this, Americans. Here's the goal. Here's what she really says that the Ward Scott Files has been telling you, please pay attention to. She says to all the Muslim Americans who are listening to her comments, this is Tlaib, register to vote. Vote in 2020. Show them the peaceful revolution that we can create to push back against this kind of hate. I want to see 30, 40, 50% increases of Muslim Americans voting. The majority of them are African Americans. They share the same skin color as Ilhan Omar. I'm just going to stop and comment on that. That's all Tlaib saying that. It's a quote. In there are the objectives that we've been citing for quite a while, are there for the Muslims to try to accomplish, and that is increase participation in the democratic process of the United States and use its freedoms to conquer it. And that is to increase firsthand, think of the cleverness of this woman's comments, increased the registered voters 40 to 50%. Of these, many of whom, as I said, have been relocated under the cover of darkness by Obama and into these communities in concentrated forms where they become a powerful political force. And then, of course, she has tied them to people of color, and included the blacks. Now, this is a big issue for me because the black folk whom I know and whom I grew up with in the South, we're all Christians. We shared, and Martin Luther King made this point and was able to make social change because of this commonality that white and black shared, and that was the common book, the Bible, and the common Jesus, and all the common scripture. That enabled King to promote the type of change that eventually was accomplished. Then many of the black, they went off the rail and went to, let's face it, people praise Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was one of the principal people who threw this thing over in the ditch. Now, he did it to get out of going to the draft, and so he goes to Louis Farrakhan, and Louis Farrakhan tells him, listen, if you're I believe it was Farrakhan, if you're a preacher, we'll make you a preacher right away, and then you can get out on religious grounds. So this using religion is a two-way street. It can be used one way, and it can be used another way. I really think Muhammad Ali, I had no problem with Cassius Clay as a fighter. I thought he was a fantastic individual. But, you know, you can't tell me that he didn't push some people the wrong direction. And he only did it to get out of the draft. He was organized and promoted and looked after by a group of white businessmen from Louisville, Kentucky, who early on invested in him and took care of his money and kept him out of financial trouble like so many of these fighters got into. You never hear about that. He was taken care of and looked after by white businessmen out of Louisville, Kentucky. So you always have to know the story behind the story and kind of put all this stuff in some sort of context. But here she is uniting all these under the racial, what do they call it, identity politics. And she's now claiming, without documentation, quote, hate crime was increased under his leadership, talking about Trump, hate crime under his leadership toward Muslim Americans, and we need to speak up, and the way we can do it is at the polls in 2020. She says, I'm going to be on the streets knocking doors and making sure we have as many people of color. So I guess if you're a Muslim, you have to, by definition, be a person of color. So, and a person of color is a wide range, it's getting wider, okay? And it's pretty shrewd. I mean, if
I'm a person of color.
We're not talking about a yellow streak down the back, Jay.
I'm white.
Yeah, but you're
White's a color.
No, it isn't. It's the absence of color.
Right.
Jay's trying to claim that he's white, therefore he has color. No,
right.
That's the absence of color.
Right, that's a color.
No, it isn't.
I'm being a liberal.
And I'm just playing the game with you to show you that white doesn't qualify as a color. But it is. If you go to the paint store, Jay, you're right? You want to paint your house, you pick out a white, right?
Exactly. I'm going to put my white face on over my white.
I mean, white is a color. You go to the paint store and you buy white paint, you buy gray paint, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But you're talking about reality. We're talking about politics.
Oh, see, I'm just in liberal world.
Well, you know, you don't understand. The political world is not a real world. It never has been a real world. It is a make-believe world. The political world's a fairy tale world. And people crawl into the fairy tales and get cozy with all sorts of goofy things in their crib. You follow me? You like my little analogy there, my man? Okay. So she's claiming that hate crime increased under Trump without any, I don't know. And therefore, and then the dadgum Fat Jerry falls for this and has a committee on hate crimes. And thankfully, Candace Owens, who's a Democrat, it blows up in his face, and she goes publicly strong and on him. So Tlaib is all over the place in this. She says the young kids are bullied in school, and people at workplaces are getting discriminated against. And I'm going to tell you about that. You know, up in we talked about it yesterday in Canada. because of this religious clothing that the Muslims insist on wearing, Quebec is just going to outlaw anything that has to do with religion. As long as you're in the public place, you can't do it, because the way the Muslims use it, it's so provocative and so confrontational that it's like everything else. You're a good person, you lose your freedom because the bad guy has abused it. And so in order to take it away from the bad guy, we have to take it away from the good people too. I mean, why do you need a driver's license? Once upon a time you didn't, by the way. You know, when there were fewer cars and all this and that, one thing and another. Why do you need a driver's license? Let's say you're a safe driver and you don't have any problem. You need a driver's license because the bad guys need a driver's license. And therefore, in order to get the bad guys off the road, everybody's got a driver's license. The irony is, this applies to the guns also. The irony is, the requirement of a driver's license doesn't get the bad guys off the road any more than the requirement of taking the guns away gets the guns out of the hands of the bad guys. It's the same dynamic. The bad guys drive cars without a license, without any insurance. The same way guys got guns without licenses, without permission, without this, that, one, another. I mean, it's very, very obvious to a thinking person, but it's not obvious to these hysterical politicians who live in a make-believe world. So I just, you know, this is the context. What got me thinking about all this is the fire and the termination of the call by Cavuto of Donahue. And I'm thinking, well, what really is behind all of this? You know, what really is behind all of this? And, well, it's a very complicated situation that's behind all of this. And if you don't watch these topical kinds of treatments of news by these news stations, you're going to find out you're not getting the whole story, and you're certainly not getting things that you ought to be thinking about presented to you. Now, I'm looking here for an article that caught my attention about Brunei, a Sharia crackdown. Let me just go to this. This article has been in the Midnight Auto Yard for a while, and back in March is when I first noticed this story by Simone Kent. Here is what's happening in real Sharia law, okay, where they really want to take it radical all the way and apply literally Sharia law. You get stoned to death for gay sex, all right? And my wife has lived in Saudi Arabia, and she's seen these things happen, she tells me. Amputations for theft. She said nobody stole in Saudi Arabia because you'd lose a hand. So you get stoned to death for gay sex, you get an amputation for theft. Imagine if we had that here. Instead of this judicial system we got now, which is just corrupt as can be. Makes all kinds of excuses for people. So there are just two of the provisions in the new legislation that's planned for this Asian state of Brunei that human rights groups have said, what the heck now? Come on, this is the 21st century. These penalties also apply to children, and they're outlined in new sections under Brunei's Sharia penal code, and they began on April the 3rd. And the legal changes were announced on the Attorney General's website, and AP is reporting all this, okay? So Amnesty International slammed the new legislation, saying it was cruel and inhuman. This is what you're talking about, all right? Cruel and inhuman penalties for potential offenses that include consensual sex between adults of the same gender. Huh? Now, they're trying to get Brunei to immediately halt its plan to implement these types of punishments and revise its penal code in compliance with international human rights obligations. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I haven't followed up on this story. But this is an application in Brunei, I think it's Brunei, of strict Islamic law. And this was announced back in 2014 when the Sultan said, we're going to put this in the first phase of Sharia. So the quote was, with faith and gratitude to Allah, the Almighty, I declare that tomorrow, Thursday, 1 May 2014, will see the enforcement of Sharia law. Well, so this has been going on now for about 4 or 5 years, and it's been increasing in severity, not decreasing. So the first phase, it just, went to fine and jail people for indecent behavior and failure to attend Friday prayers. You got fined. Next phase covered crimes such as theft and involved punishments such as severing limbs and flogging, and now it's been implemented. So this is one of the most developed nations in East Asia, deriving much of its wealth from oil, which subsidizes its health care, education, and public services, and it's an absolute monarchy with no sign of democratic reform. Now, this Sharia code is believed to be popular among the Muslim ethnic Malays, who make up 70% of the country's population. The laws also apply to, get this now, non-Muslims, all right? So 1/3 of Brunei's residents are non-Muslim. Some Buddhist and Christian communities, but they're going to be subject and have been subject to this Sharia law. I hear that very radicalism. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to be wrong. I hear that very radicalism in the tone of Talib. I just read it to you. I don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's that far off. So this
and it's coming to you.
I've just covered to you how the House Judiciary Committee morphed into, rather than discipline these two ladies, particularly Omar, morphed into attack on quote-unquote hate crime, and we ended up going after Candace Owens in a setup. It was really, it's almost worth running that setup again. We still got that thing around back there, Jay? Okay. Well, we have to clean out our computers and stuff, but you remember that, well, when she got very incensed about that. Now, there are some countries that are wrestling with this, and I thought this was interesting. I don't see us coming to this necessarily, but, in some places we're not that far off, particularly when we go to the aeroporto, and, everybody takes a look at everybody there and to see, if they can, what's going on here. And China, according to the Daily Mail, China is using facial recognition because China has got, it is keeping an eye on these Muslims because they're not interested in a religious position superseding the state position. So they have integrated, this is according to Daily Mail, a facial recognition technology into China's networks of surveillance cameras. It's been programmed, the surveillance cameras have been programmed to look exclusively for the Uyghurs. I think that's the way you say it. That's U-L, how do you say it? Uyghurs? Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. How'd you know that, from college?
No, I've been tracking this situation for a little while.
Okay, Jay's been on top of it. And there's Uyghurs, U-L-G-H-U-R-S, Uyghurs, based on their appearance and keep records of their movements across China. Now, Beijing has already attracted widespread criticism for tracking these Uyghurs in the northwest region there of that country. But there are up to 1 million people there who are Muslim, Turkic-speaking minority groups. And, hey, China doesn't want to let this thing get out of hand. So they're using artificial intelligence technology to target Uyghurs. And one newspaper claims that one central city scanned to whether residents were Uyghurs 500,000 times in 1 month alone. I just put that into the notes, students, because that strikes me as something really interesting. Now, meanwhile, Candace Owens, whom we've bragged about, at least I have anyway, over here Pelosi is screaming that we need to get, because of Trump, we need to get some protection for Omar. She's had all these threats. She's had all these threats made on her. Okay.
Can we get protection from Omar?
Meanwhile, this is the double standard. Alana Mastranglio has written about this. Antifa, or how do you say? I say Antifa. That's the way to say it, Jay. You know these things. Antifa members and their sympathizers, they are planning to shut down a Monday's college, and I assume that this is next Monday because this was written just yesterday. They're going to shut down Monday's College Republicans event at the University of Pennsylvania, where Turning Point USA Communications Director Candace Owens will be speaking. So who needs the protection? Huh? Several tweets were recently made threatening Monday's event at the University of Pennsylvania, where Candace Owens is scheduled to speak. One tweet coming from Philadelphia's Antifa group. This is according to a report by the UPenn Statesman, the school's independent student newspaper, that's co-hosting the event, along with the College Republicans group. And they picked up on the misquote spearheaded by the Asian member of the hate group there, and said, Hitler, this is what they're putting out, the Antifa groups. Hitler admiring, far-right, anti-immigrant, fear-monger Candace Owens. Now look, can you get that? Can you get your head around that? Hitler admiring, far-right, anti-immigrant, fear-monger Candace Owens brings her outrageously wrong on backwards ideology. Backwards ideology. Backwards ideology.
Can anybody say racist?
Well, I fault Fat Jerry for this. This was brought to the attention of this group, Antifa group at Penn, by watching Fat Jerry try to set up Owens in a committee on hate that was supposed to originally be a resolution condemning Omar. So you can't make this stuff up. If you were writing a movie, you would not be able to make this up. So rather than go after Omar, you end up going after Owens. Meanwhile, Pelosi says Omar needs protection because of Trump. And meanwhile, Owens is actually getting threats from Antifa, and they're trying to run her off the campus. And saying she has a backward ideology and want to revoke her right to come there and invitation to come there and talk. So it's amazing.
Meanwhile, Ilhan Omar needs protection while she laughs at that Al-Qaeda kills people. By the way, are we going to the Tlaib fashion show on Easter?
What are you talking about, Jay?
Tlaib's judging a fashion show.
Are you kidding?
Here at UF on Easter.
Really?
Yep.
I'm going to have a talk with you, lad. You've gotten. Where do you hear? Anyway, we'll talk.
It's
later.
truth.
Well, if I find it's true, we'll talk about it on the show. Okay. So here we go. This is taking place, and this Antifa chases people out, hollering race traitors and all this stuff. She's been harassed by Antifa before. She said that they yelled race traitor to her, threw water at her, threw eggs at her, and the media remains silent about it. There you go. I mean, now throw in one more thing that I just can't get. I can't get enough of the incompetence of CNN. I mean, it just blows me away how incompetent and how highly paid those guys are. I mean, if I could find in a Midnight Auto Yard here this article about Jeffrey Toobin. I've got that somewhere, don't I, Jay? Or maybe. Okay, huh? You don't see it? Maybe it's over in my other pile of stuff here. I got so many piles of stuff here, listeners, that it's. Let me look in this other pile real quickly and see if I got it over here. Maybe I don't. Well, I can almost quote it from memory. Okay, it is that Jeffrey Toobin is piled in on this, of course, and I don't want to make too much of it because it's obviously you consider the source and called Trump a racist. Yeah, come on, brother. I mean, and he's done this. This is not the first rodeo for this character. And here it is. I got it. Here, I got it. And get this. This is my point. This is how he said it. Okay? Are you ready, listeners? CNN's it's not a coincidence Trump is blasting Representative Omar. He's always after people of color. Hoop, time out. Let me tell you about people of color. Who was the only guy to predict Tiger Woods was back? He made the prediction in February when all of the sports pundits had written Tiger off. Who was the person who played golf with him? They're best buddies. By the way, the guy has been asked repeatedly to renounce Trump, and he won't do it. And he is a person of color. Say after me, class, Tiger Woods. Okay? Tiger Woods. Now, for this guy, guy's a legal analyst, all right? A legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, on Monday, responded to President Donald Trump's tweeting about Representative L. See, this is all an effort to shut up any criticism of the Muslims, all right? Trump reacted to Omar. Of course, what you know the issue is, some people did something. Boy, that ought to irk you, okay? So Toobin picks up on that and said he has noticed a common thread in the people Trump has been vilifying. They're all people of color. Oh, really? What about Fat Jerry? He's not a person of color, right? What about Pencil Neck Bug-Eye Shift? He's not a person of color. How do these guys get away with this crap? I don't get it. Well, they travel in small circles and hang out with only their own kind, drink from the same Kool-Aid jug. Simply amazing. Simply amazing. To me, the guy who's the racist is that character there. And he's a racist against the whites, right, Jay? And you claim white is a color.
White is a color.
So you claim you are a person of color.
Actually, I'm like slightly pinkish. So, you know.
Slightly pinkish. I wouldn't go there now. Manly men shouldn't be saying that. Huh?
It's all right. It's a manly pink.
You've never seen me in pink? No, we're pink.
That's fine.
Manly
Anybody wants to give me a problem about being pink, come talk to me.
Yeah, a manly man can wear anything with it. He doesn't care. I mean, you could probably wear a skirt if you're a manly man. It wouldn't bother you.
It's called a kilt.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Thank you very much for it.
I wanted to tell you something. I want to tell you something. This is kind of funny. If I can find this real quick in the midnight. I got so much stuff in the midnight auto yard here. I just can't get to it all. But you know, Chick-fil-A is always being, huh? Come on. They're always being run down, right? I want to give you some stats. This is, this is from the entrepreneurial staff of entrepreneurial.com, okay? And these people there's nothing that has more statistical study on it than restaurant business, because the restaurant businesses, and here's Adam's Rib, one of our sponsors, and he knows, Adam knows. The restaurant business has a very thin profit margin, so you've really got to keep stats. You got to know everything you can possibly know about the product and people who consume the product, and you got to be out there in many platforms you can, let people know about you, and so it gets studied, and these things are very, very well documented. I mean, so the top three, I thought this was funny, Jay. The top three fast food franchises for yearly U.S. sales. This is out of the 2018 QSR magazine report, all right? It breaks down the sales numbers from the previous year. The top three were McDonald's, Starbucks, and Subway, okay? McDonald's, I can't read all the numbers here. They're so big. Maybe, let me see, there's 37,480,670,000 in sales, okay? Starbucks had 13,167,610,000 in sales. Subway had 10,800,000 in sales. And the question is, the worst of them there is Subway, and it's reeling in about $11 billion each year. But Chick-fil-A was ranked 8th. It took in $9 billion in sales, and that number trailed Burger King, Taco Bell, Wendy's, and Dunkin' Donuts in addition to the top 3. But the most amazing part of the numbers is that they get that number of in sales operating only 2,225 restaurants. So they get those numbers with fewer than 1/6 as many as the top 3 earning restaurants. So the top 3 earning restaurants have 5 times as many restaurants as Chick-fil-A does. And yet Chick-fil-A is right in there. So fewer than half as many of the rest of the franchises are ahead of Chick-fil-A. So of the top 50 earning restaurants, Chick-fil-A ranked 21st in the number of units. Now, how did it rank so highly in total of U.S. sales? And you know, what is it? It makes, it's always closed on Sunday. Think about this, Jay. And most people have assumed that closing one day per week would hurt company profits. However, it's clear that something about Chick-fil-A makes it more attractive than its competitors. It actually, because maybe it closes its doors one day a week. Does that actually help it make money?
Maybe because they hire good people.
It does attract better employees. When this was founded by S. Truett Cathy, he wanted employees who would stick around for the long haul. And the Washington Post says that Cathy used to tell applicants, if you don't intend to be here for life, you don't need to apply. By allowing employees to have a day off to go to church or an NFL game or simply live their lives, Chick-fil-A has the reputation of creating a healthier environment and providing better service to its customers. In turn, its customers have appreciated the attention that the employees pay to them. This is in spite of Cathy's stance on same-sex marriage and some of the other things that the far left goes nuts about. So Chick-fil-A is very popular. Its food is very popular. It has good leadership. It has a good marketing team. And it doesn't apologize for its attitude and its belief, and it shows in the numbers. So the reason I wanted to close out with this here for you in the Ward Scott Files is be informed, do your homework, understand what's going on, and then have the courage to present it. All right? That's the way we run the Ward Scott Files. We prepare, we take a look. There's a lot of stories we didn't get to today. Some of the stories locally going on here are explosive. There's a lot of pushback on the malfeasance of the City Commission financial responsibility toward tax dollars here. It's nothing new to us. We've known that for a long time, and it's not going to get any better that I can see, because you don't have anybody in charge who can really step up and make the tough decisions. And so I applaud Chick-fil-A. They shut down on Sunday, and they don't mind who minds. And they've been booted off of campuses. They've been booted out of aeropuertos by the left. They keep sticking to what they believe in. They keep sticking to how they hire their people, and they keep sticking to their products. So that's all, you know. And you're in it for the long haul, as they emphasize. So we're really in it for the long haul here. I hope you appreciate us going through the climate in which the church facility in Paris burned. It's a much, much more complicated milieu than just seeing the flames. And how much of that gets addressed remains to be seen. How much of it is factual, how much of it is perception, how much of it is precedented. Maybe that'll come out. We've got the the Barr report coming out Thursday, so we'll probably cover a little bit of that tomorrow, what to expect, what to look for, and no doubt how the Democrats are going to try to distort it, because it didn't give the results they just desperately had to have. And let's keep our fingers crossed. We have got another investigation going on, this time headed in the right direction. If you're one of the deplorables, and we're going to go find out just exactly how far up into the presidential Oval Office with Obama this reached. So have a great morning. Thanks for listening to the Ward Scott Files. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for all our sponsors. Thanks for Big Daddy Productions. We'll be back tomorrow. Warthog Command Center out.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Do you want to put your business in front of 10,000 new customers? Visit wardscottfiles.tv today for more information on our advertising opportunities.